Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. It has been such a pleasure to get to know Kat Tesla and her artwork as well. And we're so excited to hear more about her process and her inspiration. So without further ado, we have Kat Tesla and Izzy. Izzy Stark is our exhibitions and digital media coordinator, and she's doing a great job. So welcome to you both.
Thank you, Christina. Kat, welcome. Looking forward to this conversation tonight. You know, we're surrounded by these beautiful large paintings. And obviously this is where you're at today. But I would like for you to tell us about maybe one of your first time experiences as an artist and where that creative spark came from.
Okay, before I say anything, I just was curious, when you first walked into this exhibit, what was the first thing you noticed? Was it color, scale? Was it a feeling of anybody? Just want to shout out. I'm just curious about the reaction.
Colors for me.
Scale.
Okay.
Yeah. And movement, all of it, well, it's all of it. Yeah.
Oh, that's great to hear. I'm just always curious how the work is received. First memory of creating? When I was a little girl, like most kids, I would color and draw. And so much so that when it was dinner time, my mom would have to physically come over and touch my arm and say, Catherine, you know, we're eating dinner, you need to come over. So that's my first, earliest memory of creating. I did a lot of drawing as a kid. Then as I grew older, of course, I did all the things that kids do, painting. In high school, I did sculpting in clay, in wood. I've done work in stained glass, handmade paper, all sorts of paint, from acrylic, watercolor, oil. Whatever I could get my hands on. There was kind of a hunger for creating, I suppose.
Thank you. Now, obviously there was like a hunger that was present when you were younger. But I know that you spent 20 years in genetics before becoming a full-time artist, right? Can you tell me a little bit about that experience, that career path, and ultimately what made you make the leap back to art?
When I was going to college, I had academic scholarships. I also had a scholarship for the first year of college for art that I declined. Most artists will gasp when they hear that. And I think in the early 1980s, there just wasn't a model for how do you make a living as an artist. And of course, my parents were like, well, you've got the first year paid for, good luck, we'll miss you. But if I went into something more robust that they thought I could make a living from, then they would help support my education. So that led me to doing my other love. I was always kind of a math science geek growing up, and I'm still very nerdy. I read medical journals and all sorts of things that put most people to sleep. I find fascinating. So I ended up getting a biology degree, a bachelor's in biology and a master's degree in human genetics. And I worked as a genetic counselor on faculty at Emory University for 20 years. But I never stopped creating. So over time, I suppose I had done all the things that I could do and I wanted to do in a genetics career. I saw patients, I did research, I did education, I did some admin, all the things that were possible with that level of education. And I got itchy. I went back to night school for a degree in graphic design, and that was kind of a Band-Aid. It wasn't really what I was looking for, but it opened up something in me, and it was like I was allowing perhaps a creative craving that was starting to come out. And I would, at the time, my husband and I lived in Atlanta, and we would attend these outdoor art festivals that are also here in Florida. And that was kind of the first model I saw for becoming an artist, because these were artists who were kind of setting up their own little gallery and selling their work and making a living from it. So I saw that and thought, that's a way, that's a model. It's a business model, and that was kind of my entry point. So I entered a show and I got in. I sold almost everything I brought, not because it was good, because it was cheap. And I won best in my category that I was exhibiting in, and I had a gallery invite me to show with them. So the following week, I negotiated a 4-day work week for the same amount of pay in my genetics job, not because I thought, oh, I'm going to now be an artist. It was more because I'm curious. I really want to know more. You know, what is this art thing about? So that's kind of how it went.
What a launching experience. You know, like right out the gate, selling everything. I know that must have been extremely exciting. Going back to the intersection of science and art in your brain, I think a lot of people assume that those two realms are completely separate. But with you, you're a testament to how they can be connected. How would you describe the intersection of art and science as an artist, but also as someone that has spent time in the STEM realm?
I'm not sure it's an intersection. I kind of view it as the same thing. Scientists are creative problem solvers, and I really look at least painting as creative problem solving. You know, you're standing in front of a big white blank thing, and then you have to figure out what's going to go where. You know, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? So it's not so different from science. And I also can say I know many scientists who also work in clay, or they draw, or they sketch. So I view them very similar, not so dissimilar at all. So rather than one informing the other, I think they're just two versions of the same thing.
So when you approach a blank white canvas, what goes through your mind? How do you get into the zone? You know, and a follow-up to that would be, you know, how often do these paintings start out as something completely different by the time it's finalized?
Well, they always turn into something that's a surprise. With abstract painting, one of the things that artists tell me, I teach workshops, and one of the things artists tell me is they are so surprised how hard abstract painting is, because there's no known end point. If you are rendering a bowl of fruit or a figure or a tree, once you have rendered it, then you know you've got it. But with abstract painting, when do you end? When is it done? So how I approach it is I try to have my most authentic expression possible on the canvas. So I try to come to the canvas empty, which sounds completely counterintuitive. I'm a practitioner of mindful meditation, which just means I sit outside, usually in nature, and I try to quiet the to-do list and really settle myself where I'm just very calm and I'm not really focused on anything in particular. And then I go into the studio and paint. I want to have a conversation with the canvas, and I want to have any kind of distraction far, far away from me. I start with automatic drawing. Automatic drawing is just working from the body. It almost looks a little crazy if you haven't done it or seen it before, because you're, at least the way I am, I'm really kind of jumping around using a mark making tool like graphite or a wax crayon, and I'm doing a very expressive drawing on the canvas using my body. And the Surrealists did this. They coined it automatism. They used it to get in touch with their subconscious. I'm not really doing it for that purpose. I'm really doing it to get my DNA on the canvas and to get into my creative mind. You know, we have two sides of our brain. I always think of it as the creator and the thinker. So the creator is one that you can access more readily when you are working from the body, when you're moving. The thinker is where the critic lies, where the to-do lists are, and the shoulds and the don'ts are. I try to keep the thinker far away because I want really to just use my creative intelligence only and not have the thinker saying, why'd you do that? That doesn't look good. Those types of comments that can enter into an artist's mind as they're working. So I work very intuitively. I consider myself a shape maker, kind of obsessed with shapes. I view the world in shape more so than line. So when I take in any room or any location that I'm at, I find that I focus on shape. I notice the negative spaces, like the shape underneath the chair, the shape between somebody's ankles and their shoes, like in between two legs. I'm very interested in shape, and so I think as I create, I will do the automatic drawing, then I do painting on top, more drawing, more painting, with a focus on shape. And it's not an intentional focus on shape. I've just learned from studying myself as an artist, that's what I'm really interested in. I enjoy that, and I observe the world in that way. And so the paintings develop over many layers until there's a point where it feels right to me, and I feel like I have fully committed to the painting. I really want my all in the work. I don't want it to feel hesitant. I want it to feel alive as much as possible, as authentic and robust as I can pull off.
So in going back to the point about the creative versus the thinker, I know that you're a coach and you're a mentor to other creatives. And would you say that that kind of is a universal, not problem, but issue that you see other creatives approaching their studio practice with more of a thinker mentality? And if so, how do you go about mentoring and encouraging artists to step into their full creative process, not getting muddied up by, the more critical mind?
It's not easy. I think that it's an ongoing struggle for any creative. It's very much like writer's block. You might wake up one day and not feel very confident about your craft or what you're making. You might feel like an imposter, and it can be a real struggle. It can be paralyzing. So in my coaching, if somebody's coming to a workshop, I try to get them moving in the body. Again, once we're moving, the thinking part starts to fade away. So if you imagine yourself in front of a canvas and you're making big strokes, that's the creator, and the thinker's doing this very careful, tiny little thing, and your body's a little bit more closed, whereas the creator is out and about and having a blast, and it's just a whole different energy. So as far as the coaching part, it's a matter of identifying any kind of self-limiting beliefs an artist might have, and they can be anything, and they're mostly imagined. There's that saying that we think that everybody's focusing on us, and we worry about what other people are thinking about us, but really nobody's looking at us. Everybody's focused on themselves. And so those are the kinds of conversations that I end up having with artists, and it can be a process. I've worked with many artists who are stuck after 40 years of painting. They feel like they've lost their edge. I've worked with other artists who are just beginning and they feel overwhelmed because social media now has shown the planet how many talented artists there are. And there's always going to be somebody better than you. So you kind of have to make a decision that you're going to do it anyway, that you're going to make your way anyway, and that it's important enough to you that you would move forward.
Having a voice like that in your life is paramount. And community as an artist is incredibly important. I want to talk a little bit more about, the show itself, Living by the Water. And, I want to go into what is it about water, right? What is it about the meditative quality of water? And why is the nature of Florida so important to you as an artist?
Well, there's a little story that goes with that. The story started with a phone call that I received in March of 2022 from a radiologist who said, Mrs. Tesla, you have breast cancer. And 3 days later, we closed on our house in Atlanta to move here. So it was a really tough time. And we moved, and then we went back to Atlanta so that I could have surgery. And then when I was well enough to drive, to be in a car, then we returned back here to Florida. So it was a crazy year. And when we got back, I said to my husband, you know, take me to the water. And when we got to the water, I think it was the first time in months that I actually exhaled, because, you know, when you're stressed, you're breathing very shallowly, you're holding your breath and you don't even know it. And so it was like this just huge release of like, oh God, you know, like it's gonna be okay kind of feeling. And it was then that I, you know, started really taking notice, I think, of the Florida landscape, the colors, the movement. I mean, the color here is totally different than anywhere else. You know, every geography, every place has its palette. And so I began doing a nature-based abstract series, which is what you see here for most of the show. And I called it Exhale because that's what it really made me do when I moved here. As far as the water part, you know, there are numerous studies that show how water can reduce our stress. There's a term called blue mind or blue place that essentially symbolizes what happens in your body when you're near water. Your cortisol decreases, your blood pressure decreases, your mindset improves. So that would be a good place to take artists who are struggling too, is take them to the water. And you just feel better. And I think anybody who's here that lives in Florida knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's just, you know, it's medicine in a way, right? And it makes a lot of sense. You know, we're made of water. We are 60% water. We're actually 70% water as babies. When we get older, we get a little bit more dried out and crusty. So we end up being about 50% water as we are adults. You know, water is what makes the Florida landscape so beautiful. We use water in everything, right? For our food, our livestock, our crops. It's really, I would say, not peripheral, it's just fundamental. You know, we can't go more than 3 days without water. So it's so essential. And I think there must be just a pure connection when we are next to water. It's like connects with like in a way.
So as you're, you know, gaining inspiration from the water, when you first moved to Florida, and we share a kinship, you know, being from St. Louis, I felt myself drawn to water and sketching near water and painting near water. Has plein air or a practice of plein air been a part of your creative process when moving?
Just a little bit. I'm not a big sketchbook girl. I find that the format is a little bit small for me, but I am a cocktail napkin girl where I sketch little ideas, usually compositional ideas on edges of things. It might be cocktail napkins, it might be menus, it might be edges of a magazine page. So I've never kept a formal sketchbook, and I think for some reason it feels very confining, and it might just be the size, because then the energy is more like this, and I prefer, you know, the energy to be more open up. So I have done very minimal sketching, but it's usually like on the edge of something else I brought, so it's not like I intended to bring a sketchbook. But, we've certainly been near the water or on a boat, and I've said, does anybody have anything to write with? And I've just sketched a little idea on the edge of something, so it certainly wasn't planned.
Yeah. More so you're experiencing it, you're feeling those emotions, and then you get back to the studio as quickly as possible to express. Going into what's actually in the space. You mentioned before you have more nature-based abstractions and then you have full abstractions. How do those two groups kind of communicate with each other? And do you find yourself starting in an abstraction and nature creeping in?
I would say it can go either way. So I start all my paintings the same, and I don't plan in a way that says, oh, today I'm going to do a non-objective abstract painting, or today I'm going to do a nature-based painting. Instead, I just paint, and I let the painting talk to me and tell me what it wants to be. And I have a couple of little yellow sticky notes on my studio wall, and one says, what could be, and the other one says, what does this want to feel like? And so I follow the paint, and it might sound crazy, but that's really how it goes. Either can flip to either, just something that appears like a leaf or a vine, and then I feel compelled to add to that, and then it'll flip to something nature-based, or something may start very organic, and instead it becomes more angular and a little bit more boxy. And so I don't fight it. I think that an artist who's trying to force something doesn't get their best work. At least that's what I've learned from my own practice. And I have found easier and more enjoyable for me to just literally go with the flow.
So I'm going to rep you here and say that you are an incredibly productive artist. I would like for you to share an idea of how many paintings you complete every year or, recently, and how do you keep that flow going?
Before I answer, it's not a, gosh, how do I say this? It's not a compulsion or a disorder. It is just something that I love to do. So I end up painting anywhere from 150 to about 180 paintings in a year. Last year I painted 174. And I only know this because my husband told me this morning, because he keeps track of things. He's my business partner and studio assistant, and so he keeps track of what's really happening in our lives. And I paint in multiples. I find that that's more stimulating and interesting. So I don't sit down and paint one painting start to finish. I find it's way more exciting to have 4 to 6 canvases going at the same time. And you get something going on 1 or 2, then you go across the room and work on a couple others, and then they start talking to each other. So a shape in one that came about might be very interesting to also place in one across the room. And they're not always the same palette. I typically have multiple palettes going on because I'm not trying to create a group of 6 paintings that is similar. I'm just working on multiples because it is more interesting and stimulating. And what happens is when you do this, let's say you're just working on 2 to make this a simple explanation. You'll start, let's say you start the 2 together, and then you pick one and you decide to work on it more, and it's looking good, and you're thinking, wow, I'm amazing, that looks great. And then you go back to the other one, and you get that one going, and the second one is always better than that first one. And the reason is, it's because you are more in a flow state, you're more into the process. So then you look at the first one and you're thinking, that looks awful. Now I gotta fix, and so what's happening is it's like you're raising 2 teenagers, and One, looks better than the other looks better. And it's a way actually to inherently improve your work without having to, I don't know, it's just a natural way to progress and take more risks in your work as you get going. So working on multiples, I think, is the most stimulating way to paint. I don't think I could just do it with taking one canvas, start to finish, and then the next canvas, start to finish. That would not be very satisfying.
In raising these teenagers. Which one is your favorite child?
I don't have a favorite, but I can tell you what the problem child was. Lemaire, the sea, was the only painting that, here I thought I wanted to do an exhibit called Living by the Water. And I thought, well, I probably should have one that's about the water. And then that was perplexing, right? I'm not interested in rendering a seascape or a landscape type of thing. How does one render water without rendering water? So that was the challenge. It has, I think, 6 pounds of paint on it. It's probably 11 or 12 layers. And it was because I was very dissatisfied as I went. I wasn't really getting a feeling of water. And when you're at the beach and you're looking at the water, there's all types of reflections from the sun on the water, and there's different kind of colors that flicker. And I was just mostly obsessed with that idea. I don't work from photos, so I wanted to get in the studio and figure out how can I translate this into paint. And that, so that was the problem child. And I never have a favorite, I have to say, because I think for me, it's the experience of creating. It's not really the end result. I know that might sound counterintuitive, but it's the experience of creating that is the exciting part for me. And that's what keeps me going, because I want to repeat it again and again and again.
So obviously this painting took a little longer than others. When you're in that process and you're in that flow state, how do you determine and walk away with a sense of satisfaction when you know that a painting is done? What to you is done when it comes to painting?
Well, there's an academic definition that we could talk about and probably would put you to sleep, but things like high contrast, a solid composition, good eye flow. Abstract painting, I'm not trying to render anything per se. So it's really more of translating a feeling. So I'm really looking for commitment. I'm looking for that oomph. Does it grab me? Did I say everything I wanted to say? So things that are a little bit harder to describe would be my definition. I have to feel like the painting is really strong, that it exemplifies who I am as an artist, that it's really representative of the most authentic that I can be on the canvas.
Now, when it comes to approaching your studio practice, you have a very meditative approach. But is there any ritual or action that you take before you start in the studio every day? I start my mornings with coffee and a little bit of journaling or reading a book. But what does it look like for you when you enter your studio space?
The only consistent part is starting with mindful meditation. And that meditation might be for minutes or many minutes. The rest is not typical. I don't really have a typical studio day. I'm frequently asked, how do I schedule my studio day? And I think the one thing I do try to do is honor myself wherever I am any given day. And I know all of us in this room have had a job at some point in our lives. And when we have a career or a job, some days you wake up and you're like, I'm gonna conquer the world, this is my day, I'm feeling so good. And then other days, you just wanna pull the covers over your head and you're thinking, oh, don't make me go in there, don't make me go back. So a career as an artist, I think, is not any different from that. You have good days and bad days. I honor where I'm at. So if I'm having a day where I'm not really feeling it, I'll do things that are easier for me. It might be prepping canvases. It might be doing a bunch of starts where you're just doing the first few marks on a canvas so you don't have to go any further. But then so I might set up 6 new starts for myself to return to in hopes that the next day is going to be a better day. And then I would have things to respond to, for example. And there's always, the business side of art that artists have to do to keep everything going. So the days that are less creative feeling might be the admin days. And, creativity doesn't really happen until you act. It's not like you wake up creative, but you might wake up just feeling physically on and ready to go. I think that's more of what I'm speaking about.
Approaching the business of art. Can you share with the audience one piece of advice you find yourself giving, emerging artists, active artists in their career when it comes to having a sustainable career within art?
It's kind of a tricky question. I think number one would be comparison kills. That's probably the biggest thing and has really come to the forefront with social media and all of the stuff we can now access online. When I first began showing my work, if I wanted to see art, I had to get myself together and get in the car and drive somewhere. And so now we can access, millions, gajillions of images and other artists' work and scroll and look. And I think that can really just be so devastating. It can paralyze you. The next piece of advice would be to probably start an email list, a very practical thing, because that would be the only thing that you own. You don't own your social media accounts. You don't own your YouTube channel, any of these businesses, Meta, whoever can change what they do and suddenly your account is gone. So I think having a way to communicate with your audience is probably the second most important thing.
As we wrap up this evening, we have time for one more question, and then we'll open up for a short 15-minute Q&A. We have people coming in and looking at the exhibition without you in the space. And as an artist, sometimes it's mind-raveling to think, what are people thinking about my work? So if you had a statement or something to say to the audience, what would you like for them to walk away with after looking at your artwork in the space?
I think I would want people to really feel, that would be what I would hope that everybody experiences in the space. And perhaps a lot of gratitude for living in such a beautiful part of the world and all of the things that we have here, resource-wise. It's just a real gift. And I think we can appreciate that even more so when we think about all the bad weather that happened over the winter everywhere else, and really that continues to happen. I'm just amazed at the news and how it's just filled with, everybody's getting washed away or blown away or something. So we're quite lucky and fortunate. So I would hope that people feel a sense of joy and gratitude and really kind of the awe.
Great, thank you. I'd like to open the floor now to questions.
kind of thinking about your artistic process. So this grouping of 9, this grouping of 6. So it sounds like you don't necessarily plan things ahead, but were these all individual paintings and they kind of came together, or you said, I could see 4 or 6 of these working and communicating?
So these 2 sets developed differently. The small ones, I originally did 20 at the same time. So what I did is I have a large table and I have the 20 birch supports, and they were all pushed together and taped on the outside as one. And so I painted the whole thing as one and then broke them apart and then worked on them individually. And there's a video on my Instagram from late last summer where you can see that process. This process was a little bit different. I started them together, but what I did was I stained each panel a color and then started working them together. But they broke apart much quicker, and I'm not really sure why, but so slightly different.
At the very beginning of your talk, you brought together the science part of you and the creative part of you when you said, I start every painting by drawing to get my DNA on it. I love that. So what does that mean to you? And I'm looking at 3 very different paintings. Where's your DNA in each of them? So it doesn't, so you don't obscure it by the time you're done.
Okay, so getting my DNA on the canvas just means like kind of claiming the space on the canvas, getting things going, not being timid. So I want to cover the whole thing with mark making to perhaps overcome any overwhelm, or, it just kind of gets the ball rolling. I think every artist has their mark. So in all of these paintings, my mark making, my shape making is very present and evident. And so I would say that is the piece that's in all of them.
And you see it in all 3 of these paintings.
Mm-hmm.
You see your mark.
Yes.
Does anybody else?
Yes.
I feel that I do. There's a commonality that's in all of it, and she says mark making out, and she's referring to just the undermarking. I think there's a layer of that.
I'm fascinated by how individual each one looks.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you actually covered up some of your marks. I mean, this is full of marks, but the one there is full of sweeping images. And the one on the end, I don't know its name, but it's totally different color-wise and everything. I find that fascinating. My own work, nobody has any trouble recognizing it's my work. But this one, I'm not sure if I would know your work in another gallery. But I love the idea that you said, I put my DNA on it. That's so cool.
Yeah, all I can say is I had a friend one time who put images from both series onto a piece of paper and sent it to me in black and white because I thought the series were very, very different. In black and white, you could clearly see the marks were the same and it wasn't so different, really.
Thank you.
So you talked about shapes. What about color palettes? Because there's some real, very different. Do you pick those ahead of time? Did it just happen? Did the painting tell you?
I love color and I mix pretty much everything. I don't like or care for using color right out of the tube. I typically will start, I just kind of also go with my gut. So I'll typically start with black, white, one warm, one cool, and then the palette will build from there. And I'm what I call a dipper. So those of you who are familiar with color harmonizing and in your painting, I don't formally harmonize my colors. So if I have, I use a 3x6 foot table for my palette. So let's say I have my black, white, warm and cool, and I start there and then I add 8 more colors or 10 more colors, which tends to happen because like I said, I like color. I won't deny myself color. So I'll take my brush and I'll dip around 4 or 5 of those and mix the color. And then that will be what goes on the canvas. And then I might do that again and again. And so the palettes are, different. They're all connected though within each painting in some fashion because I've dipped around. And so colors have shared colors, which is what harmonizing means, that each color has some of another color in it on the same canvas, if that makes sense.
Something I thought was really interesting, again, sort of to your point, when you were describing the forms and the shapes, it's evident to me, I've been living with these paintings for a little while now, and the more formally abstract paintings have many more linear lines, and they're confident too. So I'm just curious, the more landscapey pieces have the more shapey thing, and then the more abstract, more linear. So where does that play a role?
Yeah, I think the nature-based abstract work, the Exhale series, is more organic and curvilinear, perhaps. More staccato notes, more small things stacked. And the other series, which I call the Feeling Good series, and it just developed in the pandemic, and I was hopeful we'd all be feeling good again, so that's what I named it. The pure abstracts, I think, tend to be a little bit more angular, perhaps more masculine in a way, more blocky, and it just might represent both sides of me, the scientist and the creator.
So, excuse me, talking about the complexity of your paintings, and so many layers, how do you keep going? I mean, it takes a lot of guts to keep putting more and more on. And you're so good at it. I mean, how do you do that?
I'm not sure there's any magical answer or formula. It's just a decision. And I think there's a curiosity. You can always stop early. And, of course, any artist decides when it's done and when they're finished with what they're saying. As I've gotten older, I'm perhaps more interested in what happens if I let go of what I've got and go for what's on door number 2, So it's more of a curiosity and maybe more of a willingness to take the chance that maybe I won't get something as good or as satisfying, but I want to go further. It might just be that.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'd like to say that this show will be on view until August 1st, and we also have 2 other shows that you're welcome to take a look at this evening, and I just want to thank Kat for being here, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you.